Yo, what is up guys? It is esports content entertainment coming at you guys with another video here today. And in today's video, I'm going to be doing a recap for the LCS 2023 Spring Split Week 6. So I know I haven't did one of these recap videos in quite some time. They were called Thoughts and Opinions before, but you know, after some long, hard thinking, I finally came to a decision that I will be doing these recap videos once again, primarily for the LCS and the LEC. The LEC 2023 Spring Split will be beginning very soon, and you can expect weekly recaps of that as well coming up. And I will be doing recap videos for the remainder weeks of the LCS 2023 Spring Split. And yes, this extends to the playoffs for the LCS and the LEC. And this also extends for the Midseason Invitational and the World Championship of that year as well. Because I thought to myself, I can't really give you guys more content, honestly, unless I do this style of video. Because the podcast, which is the Cloud9 podcast on the channel, which is currently streamed live, LCS is Sunday and Wednesday is the LEC. Outside of that, there really isn't much content to do outside of like the general off seasons that we go through, and as well as, you know, like midway through a season, you know, we would have like a player is leaving X org and going to another player type of videos. So outside of that, you know, I really thought to myself, what other kind of content can I really do for you guys? And well, this is what I came up with, and I'm pretty sure you guys also might like it where I can condense all of my thoughts in one video. Whereas if you don't like watching podcasts or you don't like watching streams, then you can have this as an alternative. So I know I'm actually late currently on doing these, you know, recaps for the LCS 2023 Spring Split, but we do have week 7 and 8 as well. And let's talk about the LCS 2023 Spring Split and then go over the big issues in week 6. So Dignitas obviously looks like complete garbage. I mean, yeah, they got rid of Spawn, but they also look still really bad. I think Jensen is their best player and has had some decent standout performances on Dignitas. I think Arma is obviously a paycheck stealer. He's washed. He can't really play any other champions outside of Gnar and then the occasional Wukong when Wukong top is in the meta. Santorin does not look as good as he did in 2021. Tomo, I forgot is that the guy that they brought in for Dig? Yeah, it was Tomo. He looks better than Spawn, but it's not really been that much of an upgrade either. It's kind of a lateral move at the end of the day. He's not as bad as Spawn, but he's also not contributing much either. And as you guys already know, Ignar came into the split so late, Dig's season was already over. He already joined Dignitas when they were like, what, 0 and 8? Actually, so there's nothing he could have really have done. Immortals is just even worse than Dignitas in a lot of different areas. Fleshy, a person who I call full ass, is complete garbage. He stinks. Tactical is not even as good as he was last year on TSM. I thought Tactical was better on TSM last year than he is currently right now. At least last year, he carried some games. Yeah, he had really bad positioning and failed in a lot of other areas too. But at least he carried some games on Jinx and Xayah. This season, he's been atrocious too. Blaze Olive was their mid laner before. Now they have Bolulu, and I know Blaze Olive put out the fact that, you know, he's gonna take a break right now for like whatever reason he said, because of like mental health reasons or whatever. But in reality, I've seen these kind of posts before from players with a lot of League of Legends seasons between like the 4 major regions. What he basically means by that is he has no faith in this team. They've been losing a shitload of scrims, and yeah, he just doesn't see the faith in this team. That's literally what that really means. I know he said he was taking a step back, right? What he wouldn't take a step back if they were winning, obviously, right? But the reality is they're not winning. They're probably sucking hard in scrims, probably going 0 and 5 in every single block because they have players outside of a Blaze Olive who was bad. They swapped out a Blaze Olive with Bolulu, and I think he's been better for them, actually. The eye test at least shows he's better than a Blaze Olive. I think a Blaze Olive is not getting his spot back, given how okay to somewhat below average Bolulu currently looks right now, who's their current mid laner. Then you also have Revenge and Kenvi, the worst topside duo in the league. I really don't know why people defend Revenge. He's extremely bad. He can't lane properly. He's barely won lane ever in the LCS. He's constantly always behind. Can't team fight properly. Doesn't ward ever good. Bad laning. He's just not good. But it's always a nice guy. Revenge is a nice guy. Fuck off. Revenge sucks. Kinvi was this extremely hyped up player coming out of Academy. And as you guys know, because I've talked about this on my Cloud9 podcast, is like these hyped up Academy players now coming out of Academy usually always kind of suck. The only players that have looked good coming out of Academy, and like I'm talking like recently, like very, very recently, was I think Kaori, who is now currently on Carmine Corp, who got subbed in for EG due to their terrible Danny situation. And yes, I will be making a video on that Danny situation. I've not forgot. I just got to get around to doing it, but I've not forgot. You will see that video. I promise you, right? So Kinvi was on 100 Thieves Academy. Immortals gets him for the LCS 2022 summer split. Kinvi is complete garbage, guys. Kinvi got lucky to get this spot. The only reason why he looked as good as he did in Academy, and I watched some of the games, he looked okay. He didn't really look as good as people thought, honestly. It was mostly the meta of, like, Kindred and Graves that made him look, honestly, as good as he did. What really ended up happening was that he had other good pieces around him, most likely had a really good coaching staff, and that's the reason why he looked good. It was probably the setup and prep that made him actually look good than it was actually him being good on his own. You can see it on stage. He can't path very well. He does not know what to do with objectives. He can't even dive properly. He's just not good. Like, he just sucks. Now, you could use the argument of, but if he was on a different team, would it pan out better? No, he cannot play good. He's not good. He's just extremely bad. He's probably the worst jungler in the league outside of the next person I'll talk about in just a moment, which is going to be on Piosic, who's currently on Team Liquid, right? So yes, Immortals is just bad all the way around. They're just in the same boat as Dig. I'd argue we don't have a 9th place team. We just have 2 10th place teams because both of those teams are just that bad. I expect Dig and Immortals to make changes coming up during the LCS 2022 summer split when we have that mini little off season when, you know, we get to playoffs because, as you guys know, for the LCS spring season, 6 teams make playoffs, and summer 8 teams make playoffs, actually, right? And you have to secure top 4 to get the double elim portion of it, right? Alright, so, Team Liquid. Team Liquid also look extremely suspect as well. Summit is not in form at all. I thought that him coming back to the LCS, he would just clap most LCS top laners. I know he did not perform very well in FPX, but you guys have to factor in, playing in the LPL against LPL top laners is much different than playing against LCS top laners. LPL top laners are extremely better and much better at laning and how you play top lane, right? Whereas when you come to the LCS, you're playing up against players like Revenge and like fucking Armud and, you know, Licorice right now. And yeah, I think just by the eye test alone, you can tell that Summit lanes very well. But Summit is very bad outside of lane. Pretty one-dimensional style player. I would say, like, he knows ideally what to do in lane, but outside of that, he's just not that smart as a player, you know? You can tell from his actual gameplay. Outside of lane, this guy's just clueless, actually. Piosic, like with Kinvi, looks like one of the worst junglers in the league. Piosic is straight up garbage. Piosic has really only ever looked good in small situations. So he's looked good at the 2020 World Championship, but he was playing up against, like, Unicorns of Love and FlyQuest. And yeah, he looked decent against top esports, but he's never been, like, a good jungler consistently. Like, ever. You know? And yeah, at Worlds, he wasn't even really that good at Worlds. And I said this before too on my Cloud9 podcast when we covered DRX, Def didn't play that well at Worlds either. The only good ADCs at Worlds was like Ruler and, you know, like freaking Gumayusi, obviously, you know? I didn't think Def played that well at the World Championship, you know, last year, but on D plus Kia right now, he actually looks pretty good and is actually one of the best players. So, you know, Piosic was not the pickup for Team Liquid, actually. I think that was just a bad pickup, but Team Liquid always does that. Team Liquid always grabs the person that does well at the World Championships and seems to think that they're going to be the ones to make them really good. This org has made so many bad decisions. You know, I know people always say the other orgs don't make as bad decisions or they're always kind of like glanced over. I personally think TL's made massively bad decisions ever since they brought over Broxa, actually, you know, back during the LCS 2020 summer split. Oh, sorry, spring split, actually. Ever since they got in Broxa and they got rid of Impact, it's been just downhill for Team Liquid. The mid laner Harry, what's crazy is because I've interviewed Harry on this channel before, a long time ago. You guys can go back and check out that VOD. I even met Harry when I went back to the LCS. It was nice to have that moment, but Harry's just not looked good either. And Harry was another prospect coming out of the academy that people were like, yeah, this guy's really good now. And I was like, I don't know about that. I like Harry, but it's like, I don't know if he can hack it, you know, with some of the best players in the LCS. And it's very shown he's not, honestly, all that good, honestly. And you have Yeon. Yeon, I think, is the bright spot for Team Liquid. He has had some stand-up performances. He's also had some performances recently that have not been that good, namely that Lucian performance against 100 Thieves in that 1 week. That looked really suspect from them, honestly. But for me, personally, I think that Core JJ has been one of the worst supports in the league too. I'm pretty sure that's not a hot take right now. He's not looked good. You know, you would think like Yeon and Core JJ would look great together, right? Just like Han Salma and Core JJ. A lot of people thought would look good together, but it doesn't happen, right? So currently right now at Team Liquid, I don't think they're missing playoffs. I don't think they're making playoffs. Sorry about that. And I personally think that it doesn't matter if they made playoffs or not. They get knocked out in the first round. They be in the lower bracket. They're not getting top 4. It's too late to get top 4 now, given how there's so many more better teams in the league compared to them. They don't deserve to make playoffs anyway. They're not good. They would get knocked out in the first round. They're dog shit. I don't want to watch a dog shit team in playoffs. I don't want to see free wins. I hate free wins. It's my biggest pet peeve in competitive league is teams getting to face an easy opponent and then getting a free ride. Team Liquid would be that team. They would just be, oh, I'm facing the bye. I'm gonna try against these motherfuckers. These guys are trash. And then Team Liquid's motto the whole season was, oh, we'll just outwork everybody. You can do that, and I respect hard work, but that doesn't mean anything. If you just have the worst players by far, then it doesn't matter, actually. Now, we're going to get to the main draw of this episode. So usually for my weekly recap episodes or when I'm talking about the playoffs, I'll usually have the headline team in the title. And as you're watching this video right now, the headline team is going to be 100 Thieves, Doublelift, and Bjergsen. So I've talked about 100 Thieves extensively on my Cloud9 podcast that I hold with Chaz. And 100 Thieves have a lot of issues. So let's just break most of them down. I'm not going to go over a full detailed explanation on them because I'm not trying to sit here all day and say why the decisions they made this offseason were truly bad, because they were truly bad. I called their bad decisions out in the offseason on my shows, in my videos covering them, right? So you guys know how I feel about these players on this team, right? So let's start with what happened recently. They got rid of one of their head coaches, Case, who was previously on Mad Lions, actually, right? As you guys know, they also have Nukeduck, legendary EU mid laner, right? He was their secondary assistant coach, right? So currently, they promoted Nukeduck to be the head coach, and they took someone from their challengers team, and they promoted him to the assistant head coach, right? Then they fired Case. That's what just recently happened. They posted that on their Twitter account, right? Changing out the coach doesn't mean anything for this team for a lot of different reasons. Let's start with just the top lane and we'll work toward the bot lane, actually. Tenacity, also another hyped up player from a lot of people saying he was clearly LCS ready. He is not clearly LCS ready. And this is what I said before. Coming into the season, what did I say? He's going to not look that good compared to the other better top laners in the league. Nothing about his gameplay implied that. Nothing about what he was doing on the map implied that. Nothing even from the academy games, if you watch them, imply that he was LCS ready, nor could he handle most LCS top laners. He can't even handle bad players very well, okay? He can't even really handle someone like, oh, you would say lower tier LCS top laners like Dokla or Solo very well. If you can't even handle Dokla and Solo very well, how am I supposed to expect you can beat players like Impact, players like Fudge, players like frickin' Someday? You can't. He was never going to be that good in general based off what people thought. I even said it before. 100 Thieves is going to really miss what Someday did for them, you know? But as you guys already know, and most of you should know this, Someday was going to enter another year of his contract where 100 Thieves would have to pay a lot more money for him, so they chose to cut him, obviously, to save money. And as you guys know, with the 100 Thieves right now, they've been shedding a lot of content creators, staff, from their organization. They've been making a lot of cuts, and that is more or less so not just them. That's with like every esport org right now. They've been making a lot of cuts due to, you know, the economy and the uncertainty around the space, because sponsors are pulling up because of that as well. So that's, like I said before, it's not just that as an issue specifically for them. I'm talking about what Someday did for them. People really like to downplay what Someday really did for this org in general, even when he was playing. This man had one bad year on 100 Thieves. One bad year, and that was 2021, and then that's when they're like, okay, let's bring in Tenacity as a sub. Then, when Someday knew there was a sub there behind him, man, shaped it up. Someday was, I think, the best top laner in the LCS all throughout last year. Definitely was MVP worthy with Closer, and I said losing that guy is going to be one of the biggest issues, because for one, he gave them an identity, a lane to play through, but the only problem with Someday is, like, you know what, there's been times where he's not made the best decisions with his lead. That's the only real problem he ever had. And there's been some games where he's played too far forward, got ganked, and then he's obviously not been as effective, but that's so few far in between. He was one of the most consistent, best top laners in the league, and they've had it, and they had him for years. But how the contracts were structured, obviously they didn't want to keep him, which I think they did want to keep him, they just didn't want to pay the money for him, which is, I think, bad, given the fact that they brought over the other players that I'm going to talk about in just a moment. Closer. So, the best way to talk about Closer is to just go to Bjergsen. So, this is what I also said in the offseason, is that Bjergsen and Closer were not going to be a good pair. Bjergsen, as a player, cannot play well with any jungler ever. Okay? You know what's crazy? Let me just paint this out for people. You know how crazy it is? Closer was easily a top 3 jungler last year throughout the entirety of the LCS. All last year. Both spring and summer. This guy has always been like a top 3 jungler, even when he was on Golden Guardians, actually. Then, magically, this guy plays with Bjergsen, and it looks like he doesn't even know what the fuck to do on the map. Do you find how much of a coincidence that is? Why is it when Bjergsen plays with anybody randomly for just a jungler, they look bad? Because Bjergsen, obviously, inherently, just last year, did not look good. Bjergsen all last year didn't look good. It was a bad decision to bring in Bjergsen anyway. I don't care who they could have gotten. Bjergsen was not the answer for them, right? Because, like I said, comparing Abbedagge to Bjergsen is such a lateral move, and I honestly, to me, I thought Abbedagge way more flack than he really deserved. He played fine for 100 Thieves. For the most part, yeah, he had a few weeks in the regular season where he didn't look that good, but the rest of the weeks, he looked great, honestly. Yeah, in playoffs, there were some games where he was, like, straight up just getting destroyed, but for the most part, this guy was really good for them. Another thing, they lost. They lost 2 of their main pieces that actually made them good all last year and previously the year before, right? When entering that summer split. Then you have Closer, who has to somehow dedicate resources to Bjergsen, who's lost every laning phase, is extremely basically, he's just a mid-lane version of Reckless. Yeah, he's gotten a few solo kills here and there, but if you just take out those solo kills that he's gotten, he's not been that good. Loses lane constantly, so passive, he just doesn't do anything. Like, he doesn't do anything. He doesn't roam with the jungler very effectively. His side lane's like shit. His laning phase is mostly shit. The only reason why he gets those solo kills is because the other person just messes up their lane, their wave manipulation, and how they're actually effectively trading into a person they shouldn't be trading to. It's not Bjergsen playing well, it's the other person messing up. If you think I'm wrong, go watch the games and tell me I'm wrong. I know I'm not wrong. I watch all the games. I don't give a fuck what you say. Then, it's Doublelift, right? Doublelift, I think, has been their best player. I think Doublelift played better than people thought he would be coming in, right? But the other clear issue here with that is, recently, I'm talking recently, he's not played that well. They lost a Caitlyn Lux 2v2 lane. Okay, keep that in mind. They lost a Lux Caitlyn 2v2 lane. Do you know how bad that is in draft when a team knows you can't play the strongest bot lane picks? You can't play the strong bot lane picks. That's automatically an L. You're about to get walked over in playoffs. You can't play the best bot. You're about to take a massive L. Even if they made playoffs, they're going to get knocked out in the first round. They'd be in the lower bracket to begin with. They're taking a fat L. It doesn't matter, right? If they can't even play the best bot lanes of a patch, you know how big of a draft weakness that is? No amount of coach drafting can fix that. A coach just has to draft them either Lucian Nami or Zeri Lulu, because they can't play anything else. So their champion pool essentially, that's not even a puddle. That's a fucking pebble on a fucking ground at the end of the day, right? Then you have Busio, another player. What's the story here? Hyped up from Academy, coming in. Busio has looked like one of the worst supports in the league. Man is clueless on what he wants to do and playing the game, right? So that's just the rundown of the players. Bjergsen is not good. Shouldn't have been picked up anyway, based off his last year performance. Doublelift, not a bad pick. Not bad, right? But he's not, you can tell his gameplay is he's losing faith in this team, right? And I know people are going to point to, didn't 100 Thieves start like 4-1? Yes, they started 4-1. Who'd they play against? Dig, Immortals, Team Liquid. Clearly not good teams from what we can see. Then they played against Golden Guardians, who had Young at the time. Now, when Golden Guardians got gory, they got handily destroyed, actually. So, yeah, their early wins, yeah, they were impressive wins against teams that you know they should be easily beating. But they were also against teams we know weren't good either. Their wins were impressive, but they were also impressive against teams that they, on paper, should beat and that they should be able to destroy, given the strength of said team. Then, the other issue with the 100 Thieves is their front-to-back team fighting. There are fights, you can go look them up yourself, on games. These motherfuckers, Busio and Bjergsen, are watching Doublelift on Xayah fight 3 people, and they're just standing there doing nothing. These are games you can go watch yourself. I'm not making this up. Go watch these games yourself. There is moments where Doublelift is like doing something, and these guys are just watching him. Such disgusting inting levels of gameplay from this team. They're so garbage to watch. It breaks my brain having to watch these guys when they're playing. Front-to-back team fighting, they can't lane very well. The drafting is bad. They really don't know how they want to utilize Tenacity. He's not looked good either. You know, it's just, they're just not that good. I think these are your playoff teams right here. These are your playoff teams. Because realistically, ask yourself if you like Team Liquid and 100 Thieves. Would you really want them in playoffs? They're horrible. These are bad teams. They don't know what the fuck they're doing on the map. Really bad, actually. So, yeah, because I know 100 Thieves is the biggest story right now for this week, so that's why I want to make sure I focused all that on them, you know? I think Closer is still a good jungler, but obviously this split has not been performing that well. Bjergsen and Closer is a horrible pairing. I knew it'd be a horrible pairing because, obviously, Bjergsen, any player, who's a jungler, it's going to be a bad pairing, actually, you know? It's like, the identity for the team, you know, going in is going to be protect Doublelift, and every other team knows that, so every other team just knows, okay, if we just defeat their bot lane, or just get Doublelift behind, then we win instantly, right? So that's just my issues overall with the 100 Thieves. Finishing off the rest of the teams, TSM swapped out Neo for Wild Turtle, and they did look a bit better, actually. I'm not really too sold on this team. I think this team is overperforming compared to the expectations we had of them. I think Maple has been their best player overall. I think he's had actually a really good split. Would I put him like top 3 LCS mid? I would. There's a conversation for that. I think he has looked pretty good overall. Solo's had an okay split. Boogie's had some really questionable games, but has had some games where he's made the difference. So this is a very hot and cold team. I think the biggest issue they had was Neo, and I think they identified that, and now they put in Wild Turtle. Do I think Wild Turtle is going to be the X factor to push them into like top 4? No, and Chime I think has had a not so good split either. So this is a very consistent team where like they do some things okay, but the rest of thing else is just kind of whack to begin with. CLG this past week, they faced off against FlyQuest. They got pretty handily destroyed, and they stole a Baron. It looked like in the game they could have made a comeback slightly, but that was never going to be the case. Pika was too far ahead on Vi for that to be a thing. I think the biggest issue with CLG right now is CLG, I think, has... Honestly, the ceiling for this team is looking like it's going to hit soon, because you can tell, like, they're not really doing anything that much different compared to what they're doing, you know, last split, right? But I think that when the other teams with the better players, like 100 Thieves and Team Liquid, eventually, maybe next split, get their shit together, CLG might not be looking as good. I predicted CLG to end like 7th anyway, and they're 5th, so it's not really that big of a difference right now, actually. I think Contracts has had some pretty suspect questionable games too. I mean, Dokla's looked okay. Most of the team just looks okay. It's just an alright team, you know? I think the bot lane is going to be always their biggest strength. Overall, if you're just asking me, not even that we're in a bot lane meta, that is going to be the team's biggest strength, right? And that's what I feel currently about CLG. I think they'll make playoffs. They're in a pretty good playoff position spot right now. And going on to Golden Guardians. Golden Guardians obviously looked really good when they got Gory and River. Gory and River, to me, are the best mid-jungle duo in the LCS currently. I think Stixxay, as you guys might feel like Stixxay, he's been bad for a very, very, very long time. Stixxay's been bad since 2018. Now coming 2023, LCS Spring Split, he's bounced back. I don't think he's been impressive by any means, only because, like, if you're playing the most OP champions in the meta, like Zeri and Lucian, which is the only champions he ever gets to play, yeah, you're gonna look good by default. But I personally think when he's on other picks, he just doesn't look as good, honestly. I think the only reason why he looks as good right now is because he's paired with Huhi. Huhi's actually had a pretty solid split overall. Would I put him as top 3? I don't know. I have to analyze the games more, but I think Huhi's been a nice bright spot for Golden Guardians. Actually, the only bad player currently on Golden Guardians right now is Licorice, actually. I think Licorice has not looked that good. The fact that they let this guy pick Lee Sin top and then essentially was just basically a bot the entire game kind of shows that they're just going to put Licorice on an island and he's just going to just hopefully go even, you know? I think he's had a few good games on like Gragas and Jax, but other than that, I think he's by far and away their weakest player overall. I think Gory has looked like one of the best mid laners in the LCS, actually. Alright, so Evil Geniuses. I think Evil Geniuses are a team where they have, I think, the best overall way of how they want to play the game. Like, if this team gets going in the early game, it's just over. I think if you look at the players on the roster, they play as good as you think, right? There have been some games where, like, they've only lost because they've not kept their foot on the gas, right? What I mean by that is, like, you know, you're driving a car and you put your foot on the gas to keep going, right? It's almost, they're like a car where, like, they stop putting their foot on the gas, they just kind of lose their momentum. I think they're a momentum-based team based off how you can see how they play the early game. Inspired gets Jojo Pion ahead, then Inspired pass to bot, dives bot, then Inspired has him take drag. After that, he goes up to top, places wards for Someday, so Someday can look pretty, like, he can be safe, right? The only issue with Evil Geniuses right now is, I think, Someday, outside of, like, the Garen game where he popped up really hard on Garen, Someday's had a pretty questionable spring split overall. I'll say that. Jojo Pion has had some questionable games where he'll start out really strong, but then he doesn't really know what to do on the map, you know? And I think that's also partly due to Impact not being on the team. I think Impact not being on the team has had an impact on how their macros went. But overall, this is still a really strong team. Still a front runner to win the spring split, in my own personal opinion. I still think, you know, they can easily contest FlyQuest in the playoffs. Like, if we get a playoff scenario of, like, EG facing FlyQuest, I think it's very probable EG beats them in a BO5, actually. But yeah, that's just me currently right now. I think FBI's had a pretty good standout split overall, having to bounce back from being on 100 Thieves last year where he didn't look like garbage, but he wasn't looking like his 2021 self either. Alright, so Cloud9. So Cloud9's story this split has been basically taking out Diplex and then putting in a Menace. A Menace, like with the other Academy prospects, hyped up Academy player, but it's not really like that. And Menace has been on a lot of teams before, claimed to be toxic. He had that situation with Blabber where he got a chance to talk to Blabber, had the whole agent debacle, right? Then it was after Cloud9 went 2-0 over that really easy week they had, they put in a Menace. Now, the reason why I personally think they put in a Menace over Diplex, because Diplex is an alright player. Diplex is fine, right? But if you want to have the edge over your biggest competition right now, that being Evil Geniuses and FlyQuest, I personally think that you needed to put a Menace in to give you that edge. Remember, guys, this is all about the biggest edge you can give yourself, right? But I do think Zen has had some questionable games overall. Not everything for Cloud9 has looked as perfect as everyone makes it out to be. there's been games where Blabbers just looked lost and taking bad 2v2 trades a lot, right? So I think if they can clear up if Blabber can clear up taking his bad trades and being ineffective in certain matchups, then I think they're going to be a whole lot better of a team. Do I think there's a chance that Cloud9 wins this spring split? Yeah, there's a chance they can win this spring split. I mean, it's definitely shown in their gameplay. When they have a lead, they're closing shit out. They're one of the best teams at having the lead. When they have a lead, they're closing the game out. You know they're going to constantly push the tempo of the game, just like with Evil Geniuses. Both teams have a really good early game. The problem here is I think Evil Geniuses' early game is suffered when certain players don't know how to exactly push it to the fullest extent, whereas Cloud9 have kind of weaker players than EG and FlyQuest, and then when you have weaker players as they do, if you lose in the laning phase, you're not going to get to that point in obviously the mid game where you can exercise, you know, those wins, right? Alright, so FlyQuest. I think, yes, FlyQuest overall has been the best team throughout this LCS 2023 spring split, but I will say this about FlyQuest, which is one of my fewest critiques with them. Vikla has kind of not been as strong as he was. I feel like when the split started, he was really strong, but Vikla in these past couple of weeks has looked kind of suspect. Then FlyQuest have an extremely weak early game. It's almost non-existent. No, really watch FlyQuest's early game, guys. FlyQuest's early game consists of Spica playing, obviously, like Vi and Wukong and Maokai. Spica's been on Maokai Jung for most of the split. Spica goes up to top lane, wards in one of the bushes, keeps Impact safe, then he'll path, take red, gank mid, after that, recall, go bot, dive bot when Prince is ahead. That's it. That's all FlyQuest's early game. They don't really do anything else. And I know most of your early game is dictated, you know, by your jungler pairing up with one of your laners, right? Whether you be support or your mid lane. FlyQuest don't really do anything that much in the early game. So I think teams like Cloud9 and Evil Geniuses with better early game have chances of beating them, because if you beat them in the early game, like it was shown with TSM and Evil Geniuses like you saw this past week, you can beat them. They're not this, like, untouchable team. I've never thought they were this untouchable team like a lot of people have said they were. Also, they got an Ayla, who was supposed to be their original starter. It's hard to kind of judge how they would actually be right now, the standings, if they started out with Ayla compared to Winsome. Winsome, I thought, had a pretty good split overall. I think they should have just kept him in, but they already committed to Ayla, so I know why they did it, right? I think Speak had mentioned the fact that they weren't winning all their scrims, right? Speak had also mentioned, I think, or no, someone from their team mentioned in an interview that they were losing a lot of their scrims too, you know, so maybe people have finally figured them out, you know? I think people have finally figured them out, and I think coming into week 7 and week 8, they're not going to look as good as they did. I think having FlyQuest as an opponent is still going to be a tough opponent, but I think this untouchable monster people have made them out to be, I personally think it's not going to actually be that way. I think they're definitely a beatable team. Their early game can be exposed. What really separates FlyQuest is that when they do get into, they have the best mid game of any of the LCS teams, right? They know exactly how to, you know, pressure a lead and push it, but they've also had some games where they've lost Barons. Remember that in that EG game and the CLG game? The CLG game, they're definitively winning. They lost Baron. In the position FlyQuest was in, compared to CLG, you should never lose Baron. Ever. You should never, ever, 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 ever be in a position to lose Baron the way they did against CLG if you're that far ahead. Then it was shown in Evil Genius' game, they picked Garen, true, but they were also losing in other places in map 2. Prince had some suspect positioning on the affiliates as well. So that's my read on FlyQuest. I think they're still a good team, but they have pretty big holes in their gameplay, namely their early game and how they just basically want to skip over the early game, get to the mid game. If you get beaten out in the early game, you're not going to get to mid game because you're going to get beaten out and too far behind, right? So yeah, what do you guys think about my LCS 2023 Spring Split Week 6 recap? I will be doing this for the rest of the weeks of the LCS 2023 Spring Split, as well as the LEC 2023 Spring Split as well. Will I be doing this for like LCK BO3s and the LPL? I'm not too sure yet. I'll have to think about that because there's a lot of games in those regions too. I watched the LCK and the LPL, but talking about all those games it's a nightmare, actually. But I wanted to obviously, create some more content for you guys during the season, and this is going to be the way I do it moving forward. So I know it's late seeing this, but, better late than never. I always say you will be getting the rest of the week's recaps, playoffs, finals, all that stuff, and then when we hit summer splits for all the major regions, for specifically LEC and LCS, you will see me start it from week 1. So, yeah, what do you guys think about this week of gameplay from the LCS? We'll have our Cloud9 podcast talking about the LEC and G2 winning the LEC 2023 Winter Split on Wednesday tomorrow, actually. And, yeah, my biggest takeaways going into week 7 is you have your match of the week right here. EG versus Cloud9. That battle for second place is really, really imperative to... Sorry. The battle for second place is really important, actually. And then you also have 100 Thieves matchups. Golden Guardians should easily smoke 100 Thieves. And if 100 Thieves... I doubt they'll lose to Dig. But remember, 100 Thieves would have to go, like, realistically 4-1. Like with Team Liquid, who have a chance of making playoffs. Not barring tiebreakers. Not barring, other scenarios where other teams have to lose to give them that position to actually make playoffs, right? So, the matchups to look out for are Golden Guardians, 100 Thieves, and if FlyQuest smoke Team Liquid, like they probably should, it's like if Team Liquid and 100 Thieves lose their games during Thursday coming up this week in the opening games, it's looking like all she wrote. I think we have our playoff teams. I think there's a chance 100 Thieves can make playoffs, but would you really want them to make playoffs given how bad they've looked the entire split? And yes, the match of the week is going to be Evil Geniuses versus Cloud9. That battle for second place being ever so important. Top 4 still gets double elimination anyway, but given if you're second or third ending out the split will make you getting an easier opponent and giving your chances better to go further on in the playoffs as well. Alright, so I will see you guys later. Like, comment, and subscribe. Most of all, enjoy. I am the Nightwing. This is esports content entertainment. Your one place for esports content. Alright, see you guys later. Deuces. Peace.